Mr. Chair, the live stream has now begun.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hartley Lefton. I'm the chair of the Board of Directors of the Toronto Parking Authority. I'd like to start today by welcoming you all and by confirming quorum. I'll ask the board secretary to please call the roll.
Directors, when I say your name, please unmute your mic, pause, confirm your attendance by stating present, and put your mic back on mute. Councillor Brad Bradford.
Present.
Maureen Farrow. Maureen Farrow.
Present.
Councillor Cynthia Lai.
Present.
Nambi Vithi Ananthan.
Present.
Hartley Lefton.
Present.
Allison Mendez. Allison Mendez.
Present.
Jeffrey Steiner.
Yes, present.
Mr. Chair, I can confirm that there is quorum.
Thank you, board secretary. We're clearly in a very different world than we're used to. I'll now call meeting 14 of the Board of Directors of Toronto Parking Authority to order. I welcome you all to the special meeting of the board. As you'll have seen, this meeting is being held using the city's WebEx technology with directors and staff calling in or connecting by video conference, or in certain situations, attending in person at Toronto City Hall. While under normal situations, we would not be able to hold a virtual meeting with the Board of Directors, the City Council has amended our meeting rules as permitted by the Government of Ontario to allow virtual meetings during the COVID-19 emergency. Once this emergency is over, in accordance with the advice from the City of Toronto's Medical Officer of Health, we will return to holding our meetings in person. At the outset of this meeting, I would like to recognize the unusual times in which we find ourselves. I hope that you all, your families, your friends are all healthy and safe. I would also like to highlight the extraordinary work and commitment shown by the Toronto Parking Authority leadership and by city staff, and to thank you all for your contributions and your dedication. Because we are meeting remotely and because this is our first time using this technology in one of our meetings, we ask for your continued patience with any delays and technical issues. In particular, as was stated before, I'd like to ask you to ensure that your microphones are muted when you're not speaking, as I suspect that we all have had bandwidth issues at different points over the last several weeks. Hopefully we can manage this process relatively seamlessly. If you find that you're having trouble, then please take advantage of the telephone dial-in feature so that you are able to at least participate over the telephone. I also want to point out that members of the public can observe this meeting on YouTube. Welcome. There are no registered speakers for this meeting. Although we are in different locations and meeting remotely today, I recognize on behalf of the Board of Directors of TPA, the land on which we usually meet at City Hall is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Colleagues, if there are any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, please unmute your mic and declare those conflicts. Hearing none, I would like to declare that I have an interest to declare on item PA 14.4, the transaction update on city-owned 50 Cumberland Street / 37 Yorkville Avenue, Municipal Car Park 15. The conflict is that members of the law firm, of which I'm a partner, are counsel to the receiver in this matter. I have provided the board secretary with my completed declaration of interest form. I will recuse myself from the debate and vote on item PA 14.4, including any closed session debate, and the vice chair will sit in my place. Directors, as this is a special meeting under council procedures, the board may only consider the business on the agenda and no other business. Other than motions that form part of and were included in the agenda distributed to you, I would also ask you to please email motions on these agenda items to the board secretary at tpaboard, one word, at toronto.ca. Again, that's tpaboard at toronto.ca. We will now proceed to consider the 4 items on the agenda. The first item is item PA 14.1, very timely, the Toronto Parking Authority COVID-19 financial impact update. I'd like to ask Robin Oliphant, acting president of the TPA, to provide an overview of this item to the board.
Thank you, Hartley. Since mid-March and throughout this unprecedented and evolving situation, TPA staff have rapidly responded, closing our offices and deploying the necessary equipment to enable staff to work from home, adjusting shifts and work schedules, sourcing the necessary personal protective equipment, ensuring staff work safely, and following physical distancing and personal hygiene best practices. All of our staff have been supportive and resilient while meeting all of these challenges through these uncertain times, and I'm extremely grateful to all of them for their quick response and full engagement to help ensure our facilities remain clean and safe so that those who need to travel can do so safely and securely. Thank you very much for all of your hard work, TPA. Now, as the COVID-19 crisis has expanded, our parking revenue has fallen in line with the drop in economic activity in the City of Toronto. Currently, our parking revenue is pacing about 90% below previous year's level, and bike share ridership has also fallen. Our revenue has also been impacted by the collapse of the out-of-home advertising market. The advertising market drop will require us to defer issuing our further planned bike share marketing and sponsorship request for proposals, and budgeted advertising revenues are not expected to be realized until the market returns. We are continuing to operate all facilities, unfortunately with reduced staffing, as 190 employees have been placed on either emergency leave with benefits or reduced work weeks. And also, we have seen a sharp increase in vandalism over the period, including graffiti and damage to facilities and equipment, which has required us to increase security and modify work schedules to increase our presence, and also perform the necessary repairs and maintenance. As we move forward, we are focusing on ensuring the long-run sustainability and profitability of TPA and preparing our strategy so that we are ready for reopening. While it's expected that the return of commuters will be slow, there's indications that those returning may prefer to drive to support physical distancing. Accordingly, we are continuing to work on new opportunities to increase revenue, reassessing services, service levels, and the scope of fixed-fee contracted services, and arranging to cancel, limit, or defer activities where possible. We are also continuing to focus on our key transformational and modernization projects, including the implementation of our enterprise resource planning software, completing our payment card industry certification, and certain upgrades, equipment upgrades, and the payment machine rationalization initiatives. Where possible, we are deferring capital projects. However, due to previous contractual commitments, we will be completing the purchase of 2 facilities which are expected to close shortly, 11 Wellesley Street West and 302 Queen Street West. In addition, a number of major reconstruction activities and infrastructure upgrades in progress will continue, such as the work being done at Nathan Phillips Square, and we will be completing the bike share expansion in June. Our purchase commitment was made prior to the start of COVID-19, and we expect this expanded system will provide strong support to Toronto as part of its active TO program and as more commuters choose cycling for physical distancing. Overall, we are currently estimating $31 million of 2020's $77 million capital budget will be deferred. With all of these measures being taken, we are expecting to be able to successfully operate through to the end of this crisis. However, we will continually be adapting our response as we receive new information. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Oliphant. Are there any questions of staff on this item? If you have questions, please unmute your mic and let me know, or raise your hand. I'll try to see you. I see, sorry, I'm not sure who that is. Alison Mendez, yes. Alison, I think you're still muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Robin, for your report. Just a question on the employee update. Of the 350 employees indicated, 190 were put on unpaid leave. Is the TPA at what you think is a sustainable level, or if this pandemic were to prolong a little bit longer, do you anticipate more reductions in employees? Just wondering if we can anticipate a bigger change going forward.
At this point in time, I believe we're at a sustainable level. However, if the reopening of Toronto causes another wave, or other information comes our way, we will certainly be reassessing the levels at that time.
Thank you.
I think I saw Councillor Bradford had something.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Robin, for the overview. Appreciate that, and all the work that TPA is doing in these challenging times. With respect to cost containment for the organization, has TPA been seeking out additional redeployment opportunities with the City of Toronto? Is there an arrangement where that could take place?
In the initial stages, Councillor, we did reach out to the city to see if there was any expertise or any support that TPA could provide in addition. However, redeployment activities are restricted within the agencies and boards at this time. Within our own staff, there has been limited opportunities for redeployment, though we have pursued some. But the vast majority of staff are performing their current duties as required.
Okay. I wanted to touch on 2 points you made. I think post-COVID here, as we're moving through this, there may very well be a need for increased parking as people are using that as a physically distanced way to get around, as well as the bike share ridership, and we're seeing those numbers go up. My question was about the operating costs. So 80,000 additional riders year over year Q1, but the operating expenses were down. Is there some correlation there? Is this deferred maintenance? Is there a reason? Does the system get more efficient the more people that are riding it? Could you speak to why operating costs are down despite a significant growth in ridership right now?
The operating costs that were forecasted for early Q1 were primarily surrounding other activities, including our marketing and sponsorship RFPs, legal expenses. Some of this may be timing, but ultimately I expect that the operational expenses will stay on budget for the remainder of the year.
Very good. And then lastly, obviously riding a bike is a hands-on sort of thing. Could we talk about the steps that we're doing to make sure that the facilities are clean and sanitized, and how we're keeping people safe so that bike share is a safe option? And then also whatever steps we're doing, how we're communicating with that as an organization with the public.
We've been sending these communications on ensuring people follow best practices for personal hygiene, washing their hands, not touching their faces, and have been using social media and the website and so on to help promote that. In the early days of the COVID crisis, we escalated the cleaning program for the bike share kiosks. We also arranged to have the stations sanitized. But our recommendation, because the assets sit out in the open and it's difficult to control that environment, we are asking people to use the mobile app, Cycle Finder, to release their bikes. We also have a QR code that is now available on about half the fleet right now. We're continuing to roll this out, where you can use the QR code to unlock your bike. So best practices would be to use the app or the QR code and to follow best personal hygiene practices.
Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Steiner.
Yes, very briefly, but firstly, thank you very much to the clerk's office and the TPA team to bring together this virtual board meeting. I think it's very important that during a crisis, boards communicate together and with management. So thank you, and hats off literally to everybody. And I won't take my hat off because my hair is a mess, unlike our chairman, who's in perfect shape. Very brief question on the furloughed or laid off members of our TPA family. I'm assuming, and just wanted to confirm, that the ones who are laid off and not receiving their salary, they're still, of course, getting the benefits program, health, etc., but they're eligible for these federal emergency wage replacements when we have members of the TPA staff not working for us?
Strictly speaking, we have placed individuals on emergency rather than layoff. To your question, I would like to ask Arlene Yamfritz, our VP of Human Resources, to help answer your question.
Good afternoon, everybody. That is correct, that they do have access to federal supports while they're on emergency leave.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think you look great, by the way. Arlene or Robin, can you maybe briefly, please, just describe our limitations with the wage subsidy? An Arlene question.
Okay. Yes, I can. So the 75% wage subsidy that has been provided by the government, the exclusion is government entities. So we do not have access as a government entity to have access to that wage subsidy for the businesses.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of staff on this item? Seeing none, are there any speakers to the item? Again, seeing none, but if I'm wrong, please speak up. I don't hear anyone. So I will move that we adopt the staff recommendation. I'll ask the board secretary to please display and read the recommendation aloud.
The acting president, Toronto Parking Authority, recommends that 1, the Board of Directors of Toronto Parking Authority receive this report for information.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the board secretary to please conduct the vote.
Directors, when I call your name, please unmute your mic, indicate your vote by stating in favor or opposed, and put your mic back on mute. Councillor Brad Bradford.
In favor.
Maureen Farrow.
In favor.
Councillor Cynthia Lai.
In favor.
Nambi Vithi Ananthan.
In favor.
Hartley Lefton.
In favor.
Allison Mendez.
In favor.
Jeffrey Steiner.
Also in favor.
Mr. Chair, that carries. The vote is unanimous.
Thank you, Madam Board Secretary. The next item is item PA 14.2, proposed amendments to the Toronto Parking Authority Policy Resolution 2-11, special parking arrangements for organizations. I'd like to ask Ms. Oliphant to provide a brief overview of this item to the board.
Thank you, Hartley. With the city's announcement of a state of emergency, an emergency operating center was created to address and funnel any related requests through for coordination. TPA has been receiving requests through this EOC and the city for free parking for frontline workers. While our policy allows for some consideration, its framework is out of date. Jeffrey, would you please take us through the recommended updates?
Thank you, Robin. So TPA Policy Resolution 2-11, Special Parking Arrangements for Organizations, outlines the circumstances under which special parking considerations are provided to organizations where there is a recurring use of a specific car park. As a matter of practice, special parking considerations have included the application of reduced parking rates or parking at no charge. In the past, considerations have been provided to charitable organizations and places of worship. In some cases, and specifically for places of worship with Sunday morning services, TPA was not enforcing parking at certain off-street facilities. This was an arrangement that was understood by some, but that was not broadly advertised. During COVID-19, TPA has been receiving multiple requests for free parking at its off-street facilities and for the use of bike share at either a reduced charge or at no cost. The requests have really prompted a rethink of the policy so that a proper framework can be introduced that involves less discretion being applied in a case-by-case basis. So the proposed amendments that we're bringing forward will bring consistency, equity, and a formal process for these special arrangements, and really a newfound focus on allowing these arrangements only where there's exceptional circumstances. At a high level, the criteria will require that there be minimal impact to existing operations and that there be a citywide benefit associated with the special arrangement. Something along the lines of supporting an emergency situation like we're in right now that has been declared by either the city or another level of government. Happy to take questions if there are any.
Robin, is that everything?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Oliphant. Thank you, Mr. D. Are there any questions of staff on this item? If you have questions, please raise your hand or unmute your mic and let me know. I don't see any. Are there any speakers to the item? Councilor Bradford.
Sorry, just a quick question. I just want to clarify for organizations that no longer may be meeting the policy. What's the process for and time frame for reapplying or seeking out a different special arrangement? How are we getting in touch with organizations that are not going to be meeting the requirements anymore?
Jeffrey, would you please elaborate?
Sure, no problem. So we're doing a comprehensive review right now to confirm all the arrangements that have been agreed to in the past. And we'll be reaching out in writing with every organization to confirm, how the new criteria apply to their given situation and whether or not we feel that they qualify or not going forward. Where they don't qualify going forward, we'll be letting them know that we're going to need to discontinue that arrangement.
And we will provide adequate notice so that they can respond accordingly, seek out other arrangements.
Yes, we're still thinking about the time frame to roll this out, but we're going to work on it actively over the next month or two and get those notices out and start those discussions.
Are you able to, I don't have a motion prepared for this or anything, but are you able to come back to the board and let us know exactly how you're going to do this with the timeframes and the notification and what the process is going to look like?
Robin, do you care to comment?
Perhaps the best way to address it is I could provide you an information update informally.
Yeah, or in your in the CEO update at the start of the meeting or something. I want to make sure one of the challenges, of course, has been the communication, as you alluded to off the top, with the enforcement pieces. And I think for these organizations, they've got a lot going on right now, doing a lot of different things. Parking arrangements with TPA and special parking considerations may not be top of mind. Mail gets sent, it may not necessarily be received. Things get lost in the mix, and then all of a sudden we have to deal with enforcement going out and doing enforcement as that comes back and people feel like they didn't know. So I just want to make sure it's very transparent, whatever we land on, it's very clear, and that we have adequate time in place to make sure that folks have the opportunity to make other arrangements. I just want to be very clear on it. And so I'd like to hear exactly, as Jeff was saying, he's building out a framework. I'd like to know what that is.
We fully agree, Councillor, and I'll bring that information update to the next meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Farrow.
I would just like to, Chair, I would just like to endorse what Mr. Bradford has said, because I do think it's very important when you change these policies, particularly at this sort of time, that it's very clear. It makes sense also, not just for the circumstances now, but it fits into the overall strategy of what the organization is meant to do and also stand for in the public's mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Farrow. Are there any other speakers to the item? I don't see any, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Seeing or hearing no further speakers, I will move that we adopt the staff recommendation. I'll ask the board secretary to please display and read the recommendation aloud.
The acting president, Toronto Parking Authority, recommends that 1, the Board of Directors of Toronto Parking Authority approve the proposed Toronto Parking Authority Policy Resolution 2-11, Special Parking and Bike Share Arrangements for Organizations in Appendix B, and direct the President, Toronto Parking Authority, to enact this policy resolution as amended.
Madam Board.
Mr. Chair, did you hear me read out the recommendation?
Sorry, I was on mute. I was speaking to no avail. Sorry about that. I'd now like to ask the board secretary to please conduct the vote. Thank you, and apologies.
Directors, when I call your name, please unmute your mic, indicate your vote by stating in favor or opposed, and put your mic back on mute. Councillor Brad Bradford.
In favor.
Maureen Farrow.
In favor.
Councillor Cynthia Lai.
In favor.
Nambi Vithi Ananthan.
In favor.
Hartley Lefton.
In favor.
Alison Mendez.
In favor.
Jeffrey Steiner.
In favor, thank you.
Mr. Chair, the recommendation carries. The vote is unanimous.
Thank you very much. The next item is item PA 14.3, additional project costs, purchase of stratified interest in 11 Wellesley Street West, Municipal Car Park 304. I'd like to ask Ms. Oliphant to please provide a brief overview of this item to the board.
Thank you. This transaction involves the acquisition of a stratified interest built within a mixed-use condominium project at 11 Wellesley Street West, which was previously approved in 2017 for 132 spaces. We are now seeking approval to complete the acquisition of this underground public parking garage with an additional 2 spaces, including further build-out costs, which are required to operate the facility using gated equipment. A financial review of the project was updated to reflect the planned operational structure and adjust the revenue assumptions for COVID-19 impacts, resulting in an internal rate of return of 5.45% based upon value and use over a 20-year period. Jeffrey, would you please provide your overview of this property?
Thank you, Robin. Sorry, one second. As you mentioned, this is a joint venture with a developer at a site on Wellesley Street West, just west of Yonge Street. With the proposed additional costs, we'll be assuming control of 134 parking spaces. The parking garage will operate as a controlled facility. And we're just about there on this one. Construction has largely been completed. Deficiencies have been reviewed, and we are working towards just a final review of closing documents and are looking to take ownership at some point over the summer on this one.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Ms. Oliphant and Mr. D. Are there any questions with staff on this item? If you have questions, please wave or unmute your mic and let me know. Mr. Steiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple brief questions on the new costs. So that's in the briefing note, table 2, page 6 of 30, and then it continues on to page 7 of 30. But page 6 of 30, if I can ask maybe just on this additional or the cost for the equipment, there's $33,591 for the card access system. Question there, is it just we're having an additional machine or system put in place, or is that actually kind of a cost overrun for the existing original scope? And just for ease, Mr. Chair, my second question is on the next page, the top of the next page, parking equipment, an increment of 189,000. On that one, I just wanted to understand a little bit better what drove those significant additional costs on parking equipment. And I'm assuming all of this work, of course, is being done by the developer's constructor, and we're kind of indirectly approving these change orders, et cetera. So a little bit of understanding of those two cost overruns, they're hard costs. I appreciate that.
Thank you. The original scope and the original review of the investment was made assumptions surrounding how the operation would be conducted. As we've moved forward, this project originally went to the board in 2013 and again in 2017. Then subsequently, TPA has been reviewing and assessing and standardizing its operations. And as part of that standardization, this garage being 130 plus spaces, the framework of how we operate has changed from the original scope of which was incorporated in the original investment analysis. So the facility now is being operated as a gated facility to accommodate the condominium residents. So this change in operating standard is consistent with other similar joint ventures that we've entered into. TPA installs the equipment. So in terms of the acquisition of equipment, it's not so much an overrun as it is a change in operating plans. I'll ask Jeffrey to add any other information if I've missed anything.
Robin, I think that's a really good overview. I think the only thing I would add is that the card access system is intended for the residents of the building to be able to pass through our parking portion of the garage so that they remain in a situation where they have controlled access to their portions of the garage.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all from me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I think I saw the Vice Chair and then Ms. Barrow.
My question is on the legal expenses. It's my understanding that that expenses as a result of the legals being changed from the previous lawyer to our lawyer, to the city lawyer. So I just wanted to find out whether the other lawyer did all this work for $50,000, and also these arrangements are being looked at on future deals as well, where the city is taking over the legal department, legal expenses. My question.
Thank you, Nambi. As directed, we've been required to engage with city legal on all real estate matters, and so presumably there has been some duplication of effort as the file has transferred from independent counsel to city legal. That's the only information I have at this time. Jeffrey, I'm not sure if you're aware of any other changes.
No, not aware of any changes. I would note that this is it's a complex agreement, particularly with the reciprocal operating agreement, where we've got a multitude of interests. The developer is delivering not only a public parking garage for Toronto Parking Authority, but also a surface park for Parks, Forestry, and Recreation. There's a number of different interests that will need to work on the reciprocal operating agreement together, and that's sort of added a layer of complexity here.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up on that question.
And then Ms. Farrow.
I have a follow-up on that question. So I didn't get an answer for my question about whether the 50,000 was incurred by the previous lawyer in terms of cost.
Hi, Nambi. Pardon me. I believe it was, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Farrow.
Mine's a technical question. It's not, and it's something I've asked in previous discussions at these meetings, and that is really, are you re-examining at all your internal rate of return assumptions based on the change in the economic circumstances that we're going to be seeing and have already seen in terms of very low interest rates, very low inflation rates, etc. So I'm just sort of asking the question because I asked it before and I've never really heard anything as a reply. And I don't expect you to jump and be able to say exactly what you're doing right now, but it's just something I think the board should understand, and we should understand what the current thinking is of the organization as they look at these projects.
Thank you, Maureen. We have updated our assumptions on inflation rates to reduce them somewhat compared to the previous internal rate of return estimates. As we look forward, I focused on particularly on the COVID impacts for the next 3 years, adjusting revenues down to reflect anticipated volumes. Generally, though, I believe that the 5% benchmark that we have been using historically remains intact. I believe it is a robust benchmark and one that allows us to, have a hurdle rate that will ensure that TPA will generate profitability in its operations in years to come.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Robin, can you just clarify what our target IRR is for projects like this?
5%.
Are there any other speakers to this item? Seeing and hearing none. All right. I will move that we adopt the staff recommendation. I'll ask the board secretary to please display and read the recommendation aloud.
The acting president, Toronto Parking Authority, recommends that 1, the Board of Directors of Toronto Parking Authority authorize the additional expenditure of not more than $320,370.67, excluding harmonized sales tax, for the completion of construction build-out costs, parking payment equipment, closing costs, and the acquisition of 2 additional parking spaces related to 11 Wellesley Street West for a total acquisition cost of $7,270,370.67, excluding harmonized sales tax.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to ask the board secretary to please conduct the vote.
Directors, when I call your name, please unmute your mic, indicate your vote by stating in favor or opposed, and put your mic back on mute. Councillor Brad Bradford.
In favor.
Maureen Farrow.
In favor.
Councillor Cynthia Lai.
In favor?
Nambi Vithiananthan,
In favor?
Hartley Lefton,
In favor.
Allison Mendez,
In favor.
Jeffrey Steiner.
In favor.
Mr. Chair, the recommendation carries. The vote is unanimous.
Thank you very much, Madam Board Secretary. As I mentioned at the outset, I have an interest in item PA 14.4. Accordingly, I will now recuse myself and ask the Vice Chair to chair the next item due to this declared interest. The Board Secretary has advised that I will be moved to the WebEx lobby, so to speak, for the debate, vote, and any closed session on this item. I understand that moving to this lobby is the technological equivalent of leaving the room, as I would in an in-person meeting. Pardon me. Well soon.
So the chair has now been moved to the WebEx lobby. Directors, while in the WebEx lobby, the chair will be unable to hear or see any of the debate, vote, or closed session on item PA 14.4. The vice chair will now take over the meeting.
Thank you, Board Secretary. The next item is the transaction update of city-owned 50 Cumberland Street and 37 Yorkville Avenue, Municipal Car Park 15. I'd like to ask Robin Oliphant, the Acting President of Toronto Parking Authority, to provide a brief overview of this item to the board.
Thank you, Nambi. TPA currently carries an investment in an 800-space garage to be developed at 50 Cumberland and has received notice that the developer, Crestford Capital, is in receivership. Today we have Chris Henderson and Sue Kim Lee to provide us with an update on this matter. Thank you.
So this is Chris Henderson from City Legal, and I understand from the Vice Chair's comments she was looking for a brief update from the board about the Crestford receivership matter. Some of the recommendations in the staff report are in the confidential attachment and are subject to solicitor-client privilege or litigation privilege. So I'm going to do a very general overview, and then if there are further specific questions or concerns, it would seem necessary to go in camera. So I'm briefly, if you have before you the signed board, report from the city solicitor and the acting president of the TPA. The purpose of this report is just to advise the board of the current proceeding. This was written at the time that the TPA and city had first received notice of the proceeding, and before the receivership order was issued. It was issued in late March. The insolvency and the receivership relates to several of subsidiaries of Crestford, of which this is only one of three. I'm currently acting as the citywide Crestford insolvency liaison between a variety of city divisions, of which the TPA only has any particular interest, pardon me, in this particular one at the Yorkville address. So what we've done is set out in the public staff report the overall general nature of the proposed transaction and the state of the previous council decisions on the issue. If members of the board were looking for further background information and analysis about the proceeding and a discussion of some of the issues, perhaps we should hold that for the in-camera portion. My colleague Sue Kim Lee is the real estate lawyer who is assisting in this matter as well, who's very knowledgeable of the proceeding, and she is also available to answer your questions.
Thank you, Chris. One other point I would add is that at this time, as part of our audited report, which is being finalized right now, we have completed our review and we do not expect that an impairment is recorded at this time or needs to be recorded at this time. Thank you, Nambi.
Does the board have any questions on the initial report?
Vice Chair, it's Jeff Steiner. I will have some questions on the litigation and preferences if we're discussing it in camera later.
Okay, if there's no other questions, so in order to discuss the any questions on the confidential attachment, we need to go into closed sessions. So I would pass it on back to Board Secretary to arrange for that.
Mr. Vice Chair, the motion reads as follows, that the Board of Directors of Toronto Parking Authority recess its public session to meet in closed session to consider this item as it relates to potential litigation involving Toronto Parking Authority and the City of Toronto and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege.
And the Board Secretary take a vote on it.
Directors, when I call your name, please unmute your mic, indicate your vote by stating in favor or opposed, and put your mic back on mute. Councillor Brad Bradford.
In favor.
Maureen Farrow.
In favor.
Councillor Cynthia Lai.
In favor?
Nambi Vithi Ananthan. Nambi Vithi Ananthan.
In favor?
Hartley Lefton. Allison Mendez.
In favor.
Jeffrey Steiner.
In favor.
Mr. Vice Chair, that motion carries with 6 members in favor and 1 member absent.
Thank you, Board Chair, Board Secretary. So can we go to the closed session now?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair. So we will be closing the meeting to members of the public and only provide access to directors and appropriate staff for the closed session portion of the meeting. In addition, the live stream will be suspended until the closed session is over. I would also remind directors to arrange their surroundings so that no other person observes any part of the closed session debate. Mr. Vice Chair, if you can just give us just a few minutes just to complete the moving of individuals to the WebEx lobby. I will let you know when we are completely in closed session.
find a way to send it virtually with a big hug. And let's keep
Vice Chair, I can confirm that the meeting is now in open session and that the meeting is now live streaming on YouTube.
Madam Secretary, can you hear me?
Mr. Vice Chair, you can now resume the meeting. Thank you. And I also want to confirm to directors and to city and TPA staff that the chair has been returned to the WebEx lobby. And in addition, the live stream is now back on YouTube. So you may proceed with the meeting.
So, just to clarify this, I do ask for the vote myself, or it goes back to the chair at this time?
Mr. Vice Chair, we would now go to public speakers on the item.
Okay.
This is on page 6 of the chair script.
So do we have any public speakers to this item? If you do, please unmute your mic and let me know. Confirm there's no public speakers on it. Hearing no further speakers, I will move that we adopt the staff recommendation. I'll ask the board secretary to display and read the recommendation on this item.
The acting president, Toronto Parking Authority, and the city solicitor recommend that 1, the Board of Directors of Toronto Parking Authority direct that the information contained in confidential attachment 1 remain confidential in its entirety at the discretion of the city solicitor as it pertains to potential litigation involving Toronto Parking Authority and the City of Toronto, and contains advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege.
I ask the board secretary to conduct the vote.
Directors, when I call your name, please unmute your mic, indicate your vote by stating in favor or opposed, and put your mic back on mute. Councillor Brad Bradford.
In favor.
Maureen Farrow.
In favor.
Councillor Cynthia Lai.
In favor.
Nambi Vithiananthan.
In favor.
Hartley Lefton. Allison Mendez.
In favor.
Jeffrey Steiner.
In favor.
Mr. Vice Chair, that carries with 6 members in favor and 1 absent.
Vice Chair, I confirm the chair is now back in the meeting. I would like the chair take over the meeting.
Well done, Nambi.
So, Vice Chair, I can confirm that the chair is now back in the meeting.
much. Thank you very much. I want to especially thank the Vice Chair for stepping in. I hope there won't be a coup d'etat, but I do appreciate all of his efforts and all of your efforts in a very unusual circumstance. Thank you, directors. Thank you, staff. This concludes our business for today. Our meeting is now adjourned. Please stay safe. Please follow the advice of public health authorities. I look forward to our next meeting. Take care and have a good day. Bye.
Care, everyone, and thank you very much to the team.
Thanks all. Great to see you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.